Long before hospitals and antibiotics, before written language or cities, humans were already fighting against pain and death. In the cold darkness of ancient caves, our ancestors held each other through fever and injury with nothing but instinct and hope. Not just survival, but compassion itself was being born in those flickering firelit shelters carved from stone and shadow. What if the first true medicine was not a plant or potion, but simply the decision to care for someone too weak to care for themselves? This is the story of healing when the world was still wild, when every wound could mean death and every cure was a desperate gamble. How did they survive when a broken bone could doom an entire family to starvation in the endless winter? The answer lies buried in ancient graves, written in bones that healed and scars that tell stories across 50,000 years of human struggle. Our ancestors were not primitive in their understanding of pain. They were pioneers navigating a world where nature offered no mercy and no second chances. They learned by watching animals lick their wounds, by tasting bitter plants, by trying and failing and trying again across countless generations lost to time. In the Paleolithic world of stone and ice, a simple infection was a death sentence waiting to be pronounced by the merciless hand of nature. Yet archaeologists have found skeletons from 40,000 years ago showing signs of injuries that healed completely, bones that were upon back together with careful tending. Someone stayed with them during those agonizing weeks of recovery, bringing food and water, keeping predators away while they lay helpless and vulnerable. This was medicine before medicine had a name, healing powered by something more ancient than any herb or technique could ever be. The first healers were probably the elders who had survived their own injuries, their bodies maps of hard-won knowledge written in scar tissue. They passed down what they learned through demonstration and memory, creating an oral tradition of remedies that would echo through millennia of human experience. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to face illness without understanding what caused it, without knowing if dawn would ever come again? In caves across Europe and Asia, evidence suggests our ancestors performed crude surgeries, scraping away infected bone with sharp flint tools and steady hands. Trepanation, the drilling of holes into the skull, appears in prehistoric remains from nearly every continent, where humans walked beneath ancient skies. Some of these patients survived, their bones showing signs of healing around the edges of those terrifying circular wounds, carved into their very skulls. Why would they attempt such dangerous procedures unless they believed, with desperate certainty, that it might save a life worth saving? Perhaps they thought evil spirits dwelled inside the head, causing seizures and madness that only release could cure through those deliberate openings. Or perhaps they understood, in some intuitive way, that pressure on the brain from injury could be relieved by creating an escape route through bone. The truth is lost to time, but the courage required to attempt such surgery with stone tools remains staggering across the vast gulf of years. Fire was their first true medicine, the transformative element that changed everything about how humans could survive and thrive in hostile lands. Smoke from burning plants could drive away insects that spread disease, could preserve meat against the rot that claimed so many precious resources. Warmth from flames kept hypothermia at bay during the long winters when ice ruled the world, and every night was a test of endurance. They learned which plants, when burned, produced smoke that eased breathing or calmed the mind during those endless dark months of frozen survival. Willow bark, chewed for its bitter compounds, could dull the sharp edge of pain that came with every injury. In that unforgiving world of constant danger, this same tree bark contains salicylic acid, the ancestor of modern aspirin, a connection stretching back through 50,000 years of human suffering and relief. Honey, when they could steal it from wild bees, was applied to wounds as a natural antibacterial. Sweet gold that fought infection in the age of stone. Clay and mud poultices were packed onto injuries, creating barriers against contamination, while the body fought its silent battles beneath the surface of skin. Every remedy was discovered through trial and error, through deaths that taught the living what not to do when the next injury came inevitably along. Imagine the first person who realized that a certain leaf, when crushed and applied, could stop bleeding faster than anything else they had tried before. That knowledge became sacred, passed from healer to apprentice, a gift more valuable than any tool or weapon in the constant war against death itself. In Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists discovered a Neanderthal burial from 60,000 years ago, surrounded by pollen from medicinal plants and healing flowers. Someone had gathered yarrow and marshmallow, plants still used today for their healing properties, and placed them carefully around a body being returned to earth. This was not just disposal of the dead but ceremony, recognition that this person had mattered, had been cared for, had been loved across the threshold. The Neanderthals, our ancient cousins who vanished into extinction, understood compassion and healing just as deeply as any modern human ever could or would. What if we've underestimated them all along, seeing primitives where they were actually people who felt pain and loss as keenly as we do today? Their bones show evidence of injuries that would have required months of care, proof that they did not abandon their wounded to die alone in darkness. A Neanderthal man found in France had survived to old age despite a withered arm, blindness in one eye, and other disabilities that should have killed him. He lived because others fed him, protected him, valued him beyond his ability to hunt or fight in the endless struggle for survival against nature's indifference. This is the foundation of all medicine, the belief that every life has worth, that suffering demands response, that we do not leave our people behind. As the ice retreated and humans spread across every continent, their medical knowledge grew and diversified with each new environment they encountered and adapted to. In Australia, Aboriginal healers developed treatments using plants found nowhere else on Earth, creating a pharmacopoeia unique to that ancient isolated land of extremes. In the Americas, indigenous peoples discovered the pain-relieving properties of coca leaves and the fever-reducing power of cinchona bark across their vast territories. Each culture became a laboratory of healing, experimenting with the plants and minerals their particular corner of the world offered to those who paid attention. Shamans and medicine people emerged as specialists, individuals who devoted their lives to understanding the mysteries of illness and the pathways back to health. They combined practical treatments with ritual and ceremony, understanding something modern medicine sometimes forgets about the power of hope and human connection and healing. The laying on of hands, the chanting of prayers, the creation of sacred space around the sick, these were not separate from medicine, but integral to its practice. When a child burned with fever in the night, the healer came with both herbs and presence, both knowledge and the comfort of not facing death alone. Can you imagine the weight of that responsibility, being the one person in your community who might know how to save a dying mother or a poisoned child? They carried that burden without textbooks or laboratories, relying on memory and intuition and the accumulated wisdom of ancestors who had faced similar crises before them. Sometimes they succeeded, and the village celebrated with feasts and gratitude that echoed through the generations as stories of miraculous recovery and healing power. Sometimes they failed, and the healer bore the grief of that failure, knowing they had done everything they could with the limited tools available to them. Not just healers of the body, but healers of the spirit. They understood that trauma and fear could sicken a person as surely as any poison. In the Mesolithic period, as humans transitioned from pure hunting to more settled lives, new diseases emerged from living in closer proximity to each other and animals. Dental problems became more common as diets changed, and evidence shows our ancestors attempted crude dentistry, drilling into infected teeth with stone tools and remarkable precision. Some skulls show multiple heel trepanation holes, suggesting that patients survived the procedure and returned for additional treatments. When new problems arose over time, the success rate was higher than we might expect, perhaps because infection was less common in a world without the dense populations. that breed epidemics and plagues. Broken bones were set using splints made from bark and hide, immobilizing the injury while nature performed its slow miracle of knitting bone back together. They understood that time was part of healing, that rest and protection were medicines in themselves when the body was given the chance to repair its damage. Childbirth was perhaps the most dangerous time in any woman's life, a passage through the valley of death that claimed countless mothers across the ancient world. Midwives developed techniques to ease labor and manage complications. Their knowledge passed from experienced women to younger ones, in an unbroken chain of feminine wisdom. Herbal teas to strengthen contractions, positions to ease the baby's passage, hands skilled at turning a breech birth. These were the tools that saved lives in darkened shelters. When a mother died despite all efforts, the community mourned not just the loss but the failure of their collective knowledge to protect one of their own. Yet they persisted, refining their techniques with each generation, slowly pushing back the boundaries of what could be survived in that harsh and unforgiving world of constant risk. By the Neolithic period, as agriculture transformed human society, healers began to specialize further, some focusing on bones, others on childbirth, still others on the mind's afflictions. The first medical instruments appeared, carefully crafted tools for surgery and treatment that showed increasing sophistication in design and understanding of the human body's mysteries. Obsidian blades sharper than modern surgical steel were used for cutting, their edges so fine they left minimal scarring on the flesh. They parted with precise intention. Needles made from bone and sinew thread were used to stitch wounds closed, a technique that required both steady hands and deep understanding of how tissue healed. In ancient settlements, we find evidence of what might have been the first hospitals, communal spaces where the sick were isolated and tended by designated caregivers with specific skills. This represented a profound shift in thinking. Medicine was becoming a social responsibility, not just a family burden or individual struggle against the darkness of illness and pain. The knowledge was beginning to be recorded, not in writing yet, but in the training of apprentices, in the careful teaching of techniques that could not be forgotten. What they created was not primitive medicine, but the foundation upon which all future healing would be built across the centuries that followed their brave experiments. Modern analysis of ancient remains reveals that many prehistoric people lived with chronic conditions, managing pain and disability for years or even decades of their lives. They adapted, creating crutches and supports, modifying tools so that those with limited mobility could still contribute to the community's survival and flourishing prosperity. The oldest known prosthetic, a wooden toe from ancient Egypt, reminds us that humans have always refused to accept limitation, always sought ways to restore what was lost. In the end, what distinguished human medicine from animal self-care was not just knowledge but compassion, the willingness to bear another's suffering as if it were our own. That first person who stayed to care for an injured companion, instead of abandoning them to predators and death, changed the trajectory of our entire species forever. They proved that we were more than just clever animals. We were beings capable of sacrifice, of love that transcended immediate survival instinct and selfish preservation. Every hospital, every doctor, every nurse today stands in a lineage that stretches back to those ancient healers, working by firelight in caves carved from living stone. The herbs have been refined into pills, the stone knives replaced by lasers, but the fundamental impulse remains unchanged across the vast expanse of human time. We heal because we must, because we cannot bear to watch each other suffer, because compassion is written into our bones as deeply as any genetic code. The prehistoric healer crushing willow bark and the modern surgeon performing transplants are separated by millennia, but united by the same ancient and eternal calling to heal. When we visit a doctor today, we participate in a ritual that is older than civilization, older than writing, older than any monument standing against the sky. We are the inheritors of 50,000 years of trial and error, of courage and failure, of desperate attempts to push back against the darkness that claims us all eventually. Every medical advance we celebrate today was built on the foundation laid by those ancient healers, whose names are lost, but whose legacy lives in every life saved. They did not have our technology, but they had something equally powerful: the determination to not give up, to keep trying, to keep learning from every death and every survival. In museums around the world, ancient skulls with healed trepanation holes testify to their skill and their patience, remarkable resilience in the face of unimaginable pain and fear. These are not just artifacts but evidence of love, of communities that valued their members enough to attempt the impossible with nothing but stone and hope in trembling hands. If you could meet one of those ancient healers, what would you ask them about their fears, their failures, their moments of triumph when life won against all odds? They would probably tell you that medicine has always been the same: part science, part art, part prayer whispered into the darkness of uncertainty and mortal vulnerability. The next time you take a painkiller or visit a hospital, remember that you are the beneficiary of the oldest human tradition, older than any religion or government. We have been healing each other since before we were fully human, since before language could name what we were doing when we bound each other's wounds with care. This is what makes us human, not our tools or our intelligence, but our refusal to let each other die alone, our insistence that every life matters beyond measure. The stone memory of those ancient healers remains in every bone that shows signs of careful treatment, every grave surrounded by medicinal plants, placed with reverence and love. They are gone now, vanished into the silence of deep time. But their work continues in every emergency room, every clinic, every hand that reaches out to comfort. Prehistoric medicine was not primitive but pioneering, not ignorant but courageously experimental, not cruel but compassionate beyond what we sometimes manage even today with all our advantages. And in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, we can still hear their ancient promise echoing across the ages: I will not abandon you. I will try to heal you. You are worth saving.